even-numbered month at 3:30 p.m. I call this meeting of the Rental Housing Advisory Board to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Margie Davy,
Here.
Katrina DeGroot, Danny Garcia,
Here.
Steve Herman,
Here.
Todd Hutchison,
Here.
Linda Javaltis. Here. Timothy Ernst.
Here. We now have time for citizen statements, but seeing as there are no other citizens here who aren't already on our agenda for today, we will move to item D, approval of minutes from our December 11th, 2019 meeting.
Move to approve as written.
Any discussion?
We need a second.
Second.
I second.
Any discussion? We good? All right, we'll vote to approve as written then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I believe the vote is unanimous. And the minutes are approved. We'll move on next to item E. We have here Attorney Forsgren from UWO, who's graciously agreed to come here after a few months of negotiating with us to fill us in on some of the issues around campus he's been encountering pertaining to rental housing. So Attorney Forsgren, if you take the podium, please.
I don't think we've quite settled on what my fee is going to be, but what I'm going to give you, probably zero, is totally appropriate. I was telling John, I felt a little bit like Klinger on MASH, because every time I was supposed to be here, something came up, and I felt like, I was looking for a Section 8, trying to get out of the service or something. So I appreciate the patience, everybody, and hopefully I can give you some information. We have some help. Obviously, as a follow-up today, if you ever need to get a hold of me, Casey and Andrew both know how to reach me and so on, and I'm totally accessible. I'm not a landlord Nazi, so to speak. I'm there to try and solve problems, and in my case, it's to solve student-related problems. So a little bit of background. I am a real attorney. Students come in and say, "Are you a real attorney?" Because I'm sitting there, I don't have a suit coat on. I am a real attorney. I've been practicing for over 40 years. I've been the attorney at the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh for the students for 41 years. My duties there entail advising students on a myriad of issues, everything from paternity actions, underage drinking, possession of pot, landlord-tenant, consumer-related items. Again, I've been doing it for a long time. I thoroughly enjoy working with young people. In my private practice, I was the assistant city attorney in Neenah for 22 years, doing their insurance-related work and prosecuting drunk drivings and disorderlies and domestics and so on. I still do some municipal work for the township of Dale. My private practice for years, I did personal injury work and the standard things you do in a small town practice. I live in Fremont, and now I'm pretty much limited. I do a lot of custody-related work where I serve as an advocate for young people whose parents are involved in marital difficulties. So with that background, it was my intention to discuss some issues that I feel might be of importance to you folks. I'm not going to go through a bunch of war stories. Like I said, I've been at it 41 years, and I would bore you to tears, and more so than I probably will anyways. But first of all, the city inspection program. I was involved with one of the committees that was involved in putting some of this together. I didn't formulate the language, but I had some input, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago during the summer months and so on, okay? There were obviously representatives from the landlord community, and certainly they deserved to be there and should have been there. From my perspective at the university, the housing inspection program is an outstanding thing, okay? And I say that because if I had a parent walk into my office and ask about housing, I can now say the city is attempting to make certain that your child, okay, your son or daughter, is going to have housing that is safe as we can make it, okay? And I think that's significant. And it's I would point out to people in the administration, I think that's a great selling point for the university, okay? It's all about marketing this day and age for universities. So they're building buildings left and right because it's a competitive business. But I think it's an outstanding thing. Now, when the first incarnation of the inspection program came in, you may or may not have noted that there were signs popping up all over town about landlords defending students' Fourth Amendment rights. I tried to circulate a campus-wide email, and the administrator, who was kind of my boss at the time, who is now suing the university and has been canned, he wouldn't let me circulate it. What my email in essence was going to say, okay, this is a wonderful thing. If students have any question about the program, come in and see me and I'll explain it, okay? And I then had, and as a lawyer you learn to be a bit snarky, it goes with the training. But I made the comment that I said I thought it was highly unusual for landlords to be coming to the defense of students' Fourth Amendment rights, okay? So there was some blowback, but I have all the information about the inspection program at the university. I'm totally supportive of it as a student government. Okay, I think it's an excellent thing. Students, I still have students come in and say, well, what about if I let the inspectors in? You know, and they're worried about, are they going to get caught with, you know, a baggie full of pot, beer in their refrigerator because they're underage, okay, or some other contraband. And I have two responses to that. I said, one, the inspectors are there to look at housing and related issues. They're not on a search and seizure mission. And I tell the students, and I said, if this turns out to be a program by the city of Oshkosh, okay, a clandestine attempt to, you know, be in the pot busting business, the underage drinking business, I said, I will handle, the suppression motion on any evidence that is found gratis, okay? So I said, this is not why they're there. The other comment I made from the student government was, if you are so incompetent that you know there's going to be people coming to inspect your property, okay, and you leave whatever it is that you want to hide in plain view, I said, you probably shouldn't be at this university because intellectually you're not capable of getting through this program, okay? And, you know, I get these glassy-eyed looks from the students, but, you know, I mean, and again, I don't want this interpreted as, oh, well, he's telling them to, you know, cheat, steal, whatever. That's not it at all. But the reality is this program is an excellent thing, and I'm totally supportive of it. You know, safe housing, years ago, we had a student die in a fire. It was in one of the older houses. I don't remember what caused it, but this is the kind of program that might have prevented something like that. Landlords, the blowback, you know, they cost related. I believe a letter was circulated, okay, that I got, that some landlords are starting to charge if they have to interact with the inspection department and charging the students an hourly rate. I have not had to litigate that yet, but I would welcome the opportunity, okay? That, such a measure by a landlord, I think is patently illegal. I think it has a chilling effect. As a tenant, you have every right to ask for any service that is reasonable, that is provided by the you know, a city or the state for that matter, any inspection, and to threaten eviction for such an action, or to threaten, you know, say you have to pay for it, is what the law calls retaliatory eviction, and it's just not going to stand. So I am not worried about that. I sent a letter, I believe I sent it directly to Casey, and because this is, you know, what's being put out there. And the landlords, I mean, it's a scare tactic, okay? You need to understand that the population that I deal with are students who after their first year can move off campus. For many of these young people, it's the first contract they've ever signed. It's their first time away from home. They're glassy-eyed about what this experience is going to be. They find a couple of buddies who are wonderful to be around when they're at Kelly's and had a couple of tap beers, but maybe totally irresponsible when they get in a living situation. Little things like paying your rent and, you know, mowing the lawn if that's part of it, you know, shoveling the snow. And that's what causes problems. And it's not an excuse, it's not a justification for their actions, but it's an explanation for what I have to deal with and what they're dealing with, okay? Many of them never read the contracts, never read the leases. I pointed out to people that when I first started at the university, and it was a long time ago, nobody rented an apartment or looked for an apartment till after spring break, March. They didn't even think about it. Now, they rent, they move in on September 1st, and on September 5th or 10th or whatever, the landlord is at the door, handing them a lease saying, well, this is for next year, because this place is gonna go, okay, this is a really good spot, and they sign up. Now, understand, and you all do, we have young people who don't know if they're even gonna be in Oshkosh the next year. They may flunk out, they may get, head off to the service, they may fall in love, there's a zillion things, and yet they're signing these leases, and obviously, it's a contractual relationship, and they have to honor it, and I have to tell them what many times very painful lessons about what this could cost them unless they can find a subtenant, so on and so forth. So that's the population I'm dealing with, but again, I can't stress enough how important I feel the inspection program is, okay? And I don't know what the status is and what the blowback from, I know some of the blowback from landlords, but not formally from, a board like yourselves. But, I'll come over here and talk to anybody about the inspection program. I just find it very difficult to sit there and say, gee, we shouldn't do something that makes housing better. And what I don't understand is, if the landlords are so proud of these properties, okay, why aren't they opening their doors? Repairs are always a problem with students, okay? And years ago, I was on one of the 3 committees that I, over the years, have been on to deal with housing-related issues. I think we met in this room, as a matter of fact. And I think Bruce Lutke was the housing inspector at that time, okay? That was a long time ago. And landlords, there were several representatives on the committee, and they would look at me and say, well, those students, the only reason they complain about repairs is that because they haven't paid their rent, okay? And now they're looking for an excuse to get out, okay? Does that happen? You bet it does, okay? The first question I ask when the student comes in and they do a little intake sheet with me, the nature of the problem, are they there because, they've been sued by somebody or the landlord or whatever? They come in and I look at it and they say, landlord isn't making repairs, okay? And they all think that, that's gonna be their out. They didn't fix the faucet, there's a riser that's bad or something. And the first question I ask them every time, are you current in your rent? Well, if they're current in their rent, then we can move to the next step. If they're not, then I really start to explore it. Or the other question is, have you found a partner that you want to move in with next door and you want to get out of this lease? Okay, and that's oftentimes the case. So I asked them about, okay, what about the repairs? What are your concerns? And I'll write it down. And then the next question, and it's hard for those of us in this room to believe it, but I say, does the landlord know that you have these concerns? Well, no, but he should. I said, well, he or she may have 100 properties. So you got to advise them. You got to let them know, okay? Before you have any expectation that they should be repaired, the landlord's got to know what's going on. And it sounds like you're probably looking, well, nobody's at. It's not a question of these students being ignorant. They just never think of that, okay? So I tell them, before I'm going to do anything further, you go and let the landlord know, and I have a form or an outline that I give them, and I say, you let the landlord know, and then if he or she does not respond, I have a form that I put together. It's a user-friendly. Casey and Andrew have seen dozens of them because I have them fill it out. I give the blank that you put in, give the landlord 10 days to initiate repairs. If they don't, you send it over here. The copy of it goes here, and then you call here. And I said, they will, I would assume the housing inspectors, depending on the nature of it, will want to take a look at this. And it's been effective. It has quieted the idea that, I'm over there just trying to get students out of leases. It's a rude awakening when they're staring at, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, okay, for a place they're not going to be in. Years ago, you saw most rents were monthly rentals. Now most landlords get the money up front, okay, at least a quarter of the year, sometimes the full year. Nothing illegal about that. From my perspective as somebody who represents tenants, I don't like it. I argue 2 things. So I don't argue, I point out to students, okay? One, the landlord's working, making interest on your money. Not a lot, okay? And secondly, if I'm renting, okay, I'm renting from John, and he's got 10 grand of my money, and I say, John, these stairs, man, the rails are loose and we're just about falling through them. His incentive to get that repaired may not be the greatest because he knows I'm not going anywhere, okay, when he's sitting on 10 grand of my money. It's got a chilling effect. But it's the way of the world, and I understand that. There's nothing illegal about it. I don't want anybody to say, oh, he thinks it's not illegal. It's from the landlord's perspective, I understand why they do it. It's good business, okay. The change in housing that I've seen over the years, there used to be a lot of what I call mom and pop kind of landlords. They had one house, two houses, some of them had rooms that they rented in the house and so on. Now we have a lot of some really big operations, okay? And the years back, the big operations were Strunzy and Brinkman, and those were two that always come to mind. Now they're, some of these, I had an issue where the apartment wasn't ready for occupancy, so I got a hold of the lawyer. Well, she was in Indianapolis, okay, because it's one of these operations that owns rental housing in all sorts of college campuses. Again, there are pros and cons of that. If you're a believer that the corner grocery store was a lot nicer because you could talk to the owner, okay, then you like the mom and pop. If you believe that Walmart's the place to go because price is there, is better, and have a better choice, and they may pay more attention to major things, and you get a TV set and a few other things, then you're in favor of the bigger housing. So again, there's no right or wrong there. It's just what you like. But I still see a lot of problems with security deposits. The landlords, for the most part now, are pretty good about getting back within the 21 days after the end of the lease. Boy, when I first started out, I could have retired on the money if I wanted to sue everybody who didn't return them in time, and I tried to collect attorney's fees. But now they, for the most part, get them back in time. One ploy that landlords like to use, let's say that you have a $500 security deposit on a unit. And the landlord will send the withholding statement back saying, okay, fix this, fix that, and this needs to be repaired, I had to fix this. And the bottom line will be $700, so you owe me $200, okay? Now, some landlords I don't think ever have any intention of chasing that $200, but by sending it in that form, okay, the student goes, oh man, if I make an issue about this, okay, I might be on the hook for another $200. I'll just let them keep the security deposit and I'll head off into the sunset, okay? I'm not saying every landlord's unethical about that. I'm just saying that is a very effective tool, and students look at the disparity in dealing with, adults and corporate lawyers and everything, and having to deal with this on their own if they go into small claims court and so on. And there's some leverage there. That's reality. That's one of the reasons I'm there, to try and level the playing field to some degree. Does anybody have any questions so far? Anything that they want to bring up? I've been, when I first started, I was in the job literally 3 hours before I had somebody come in on a housing discrimination case. It was the first one I think they'd had in Oshkosh in 20 years. Failure to rent to African American students. We had somebody go in and test. I mean, it was classic. I ended up sending it down to attorney in Milwaukee who took care of it. But I thought, man, this is going to be an interesting job if I have this kind of caseload. But that has leveled down. I haven't seen a lot of discrimination in housing. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I have not seen it recently. Like I said, literally 40 years ago, first case, and we had the television here, and the student who was responsible for hiring me was the president of the student organization, and a guy named Joel Villa. He liked playing to the cameras. So they had WFRB came down, they wanted to interview me, and I said, no, I'm not getting interviewed. I said, I'm not trying this thing on television. I'm trying it, when we have the board meet and everything else. And Joel just stepped right in and said, well, I'll talk to you. He didn't know anything about the case, but he wanted, I'll never forget, it was a long time ago. Repairs, what I would suggest to landlords regarding repairs is, I think there's a certain amount of resentment on students when they've been nickel and dimed, okay? If I were a landlord, and I'm not, but if I were, and some students said, gee, I need this fix, it's gonna cost $50, can you come over and do that, put a new riser in? I don't know that I'd make a big deal of that. I think I would try and get after those things. Now, are there situations where students have trashed places? You bet there are. Tom Nesbitt, who is an attorney in town, doesn't practice anymore, and he had lots of housing, and just by happenstance, he had a lot of football players that reside in those places. And I used to have conversations with him all the time, and he'd say, I think some students are going to come in to see you. They're renting in my place. You want to come and look at it? Let me know, and I'll go look at it. And, you know, obviously they've probably been overserved at one of the local watering holes, and they decided to, you know, carry the football game on into the living room, and there were holes in the walls and everything. And students who came in to see me on those, I'd say, I have some advice for you. Try and work this out with Mr. Nesbitt, and you better get ready to get a checkbook out. Okay. Repairs, again, are an issue. I think it's, overall, it's probably better than it was, because I think the quality of housing is better. And so you're not dealing with a lot of these places that are falling down around the students, as many, okay? I mentioned about security deposits. In my opinion, the good properties rent by word of mouth, okay? I had a lady years ago who, she'd come in and see me. She was a landlord. She had 10 or 12 units, and you know, she was there for students' graduations, and her places, I never had an issue, you know, in all the years. She just, you know, they rented. She was conscientious. She checked on her properties. You know, I don't think students want the landlord hovering around the premises 24/7 just to see what's going on. But by the same token, you show up on a Saturday afternoon and you may, you know, talk to the tenants, say, well, is there anything I can help out here, anything going on? I think it would go a long ways to making things better. I understand the stuff to do when you got 200 units. Okay, there's a reality check there. Just looking here at other notes that I wrote down. Again, the early lease signing, I think, is an unmitigated disaster, but I can't do anything about it. When I first started, I'd have a seminar, and that was back in the day before we had computers and everything, so we put out a housing guide, and the landlords put their properties in there, and we would have a stack of them there. We'd hold them hostage, and if you came to the seminar, and I'd have like 200 students there, and listen to my spiel for half an hour, then you got the guide 2 days ahead of everybody else, because we literally kept them under lock and key. It was effective, okay, because at least I could tell students about, you know, what they're getting into. You know, I used to open my presentation by saying, you know, that guy that is the fun time guy in the bar, maybe the world's worst roommate. You're trying to, you know, study for the MCATs, and he's bringing Kelly's home with him at 2 in the morning. Not a good combination. And they would all look at me and laugh, and, you know, back then I was considerably younger. You do the math, okay? But they'd look at me like, what does this dodo know, okay? And I was single, and I knew something about living. I knew something about partying, okay? And they would look at me like I was from another planet. Like I said, good properties rent by word of mouth. I mentioned about the don't nickel and dime. We're not, you know, we're not looking to sue people over there. I got a case going on right now. It hasn't been filed. The complaint's been drafted. Landlord 10 days late with a $2,400 security deposit. Well, the math on that is before the court does anything, they got to double that. So now we got $4,800. Okay, I'm entitled, even though I do it through the university, I'm entitled to reasonable attorney's fees, which I'm certainly going to ask for. Okay, and that's the starting point. And I've written 2 letters to the landlord saying, do you want to talk about this? Do you want to talk about this? And no response. I'm left with no choice. You know, I had a legislator when I first started. It was somebody for the Milwaukee area, called my boss at the university and said, well, you got to do something about firing Mr. Forsgren. And Tom Sickness was the guy, and he said, what are you talking about? He said, well, he's suing landlords with taxpayer dollars. Okay, well, that's not true. Okay, and none of you are paying for having me there. The students pay a fee out of their, what's called the activity fee, or their segregated fee. They pay $5 to come and see me, and that's it. So there's no taxpayer impact, okay, on what I'm doing. Okay, that's been spread around for years. I've had people come in and see me. One of the attorneys in town who represented a big-time landlord came in and said, well, you know, you really shouldn't be picking on these people because they donate to the university. I said, really? So there should be 2 different standards, those that donate and those that don't? And he said, well, that's not what I'm saying. I said, that's exactly what you're saying. So after he left, I called the foundation, and don't get me started on the foundation at this point. But at the time, it was a little more flush than it is now, and we didn't have all the issues. But And I said, how much money does so-and-so give? And he said, it's not very much. He said, if they're suggesting you don't sue them, don't listen to them, okay? You know, so I've had some pressures, and that goes with the territory. Trying to see, again, I'm dealing with a young population. They don't read the leases. They're just giddy about, you know, being able to get off campus. I have quieted down the idea that their parents should sign as a guarantor. Boy, I saw a lot of those for a while. And I tried to explain to the parents when we were getting sued that they're not only guaranteeing their son or daughter's rent, they're guaranteeing everybody else in the apartment because it's joint and several liability, okay? And that was a concept. They'd look at me like, are you sure about that? I said, unfortunately, I'm very sure about that. Beer parties, when I have not had a lot of issues. For a while, I was dealing with, you know, every generation that comes in thinks they reinvented the wheel. And they all think that they're the first group to charge $1 for a cup, and that'll get them around, you know, having 2 kegs of beer in the basement of the house. And it doesn't, obviously. But I haven't seen a lot of that. Part of it is, I think, because we have fewer of these older houses. I know they still exist, but I have not had a lot of students in on the party thing and, you know, running an underage tavern is what it amounted to. And I explained to students, I said, the drinking aspect of it aside, I said, there's one way out of that basement, and if somebody, you know, that thing starts on fire, you're dead, okay? And, you know, they think I'm a little melodramatic, but that's the unfortunate thing. They are dead, okay? And that's why, you know, I'm supportive of those kind of rules. Noisy neighbors and stuff, I haven't had a lot of students who've been brought in for, you know, disorderly conducts, and I'm not saying they don't exist, I just haven't seen a lot of them lately. Is there anything you want to talk to me about or ask about? I don't know exactly what you wanted me to cover, but.
Sure. So I know we've been kicking around a couple of different ideas to just improve life for student housing and for tenants in general. One thing we're looking at, for instance, is an ordinance that would prohibit landlords from discouraging participation in the rental, or in the inspection program. Do you think that that is something that would fly under state law, or?
I think it would be hard to enforce, okay, and it'd have to be so narrowly drafted, okay, because proof would be tough. That's where I'm at. I mean, I'd love to see it, don't get me wrong, but I think the proof issue on something like that would be tough. You know, you'd have the swearing contest, the tenants in, my landlord said, you know, now if they put it in paper and put it in writing and put it on emails, then you got a case, okay?
I think that's what we're trying to cover, yeah.
And it may, you know, it's like a lot of laws that it may be tough to enforce, but if they tamp down some of the situations, it's not all bad. You know, drunk driving laws haven't solved the drunk driving problem, but we got generations now over at the university, very different than it was when I started there. Now we got a ride service, you know, that student government has put together, and they're very conscious of having a designated driver and so on, which is a good thing. So it's a life-saving thing. And so I certainly would take a run at it. You know, the other thing is take a shot at it and let somebody tell you it doesn't pass constitutional muster. It's not the first time that, you know, people float trial balloons all the time legally.
Mm-hmm. In your discussions with students, have they seemed at all aware of the rental inspection program, how it works?
Well, I think they're aware of it, okay? And when they've come in to see me, they're aware of it, but we have circulated some emails, and as I sit here and I was just thinking to myself, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to circulate an email, just simply say, just to make you know, if you have questions regarding the inspection program, please come and see me. We did that a while ago, but it doesn't hurt to repeat that. And I'll be happy to do that. I'll put that out there.
Great.
Publicizing that is something I have no problem with. The guy got canned and is suing. He said, well, you're speaking for the university. And I got a pretty heated argument with him. I said, no, I'm speaking for the students. I said, I don't answer to you. Okay, the students can can me tomorrow. I walk over there today and they don't like, you know, the sweater I'm wearing. I'm done. Okay, that's okay. That's the way it works. But that I don't speak, for policy for the university, never have. I don't get any benefits, and I've been totally an independent contractor, no health insurance, nothing. And which is good, because I can speak in good faith to the students and say, I'm there for you, not for administration policies.
In dealing with the area around campus, particularly where the students live, well, in general, it's been stated that like most landlords in Oshkosh are mom and pop landlords, as you kind of described it earlier. But in your experience, has it been mainly those larger corporate kind of landlord entities, or maybe even out-of-state landlords that operate mainly around campus?
Well, there's more and more of those. I mean, you look at the block where the Radford, you got Schwab and all the other development there. Those are all big dogs. There's no mom and pop operations there, And I've had dealings with Schwab. I've no issue. There are times I disagree with their approach on things, but that's why we go and talk to a impartial magistrate if we don't like what's going on. And I do, when students come in and they say, the landlord's ripping me off and doing all this sort of stuff, they don't have any specifics. I said, well, wait a minute. I said, these landlords are not in the charity business, okay? They have a right to make a living. That's why they're doing this. And I said, they're paying for insurance, they're paying on a mortgage, they're paying for, maintenance. And I said, so if you're in here with the expectation that you're gonna get a sympathetic ear from me about that landlords are all, corporate pigs because they're making money, I said, you're talking to the wrong guy, okay? And I've had that discussion. I don't see as much as that as I used to, but, these things kind of go in waves. For a while, that was the thing, they're already, well, there's an easy out to that. Don't sign that lease if you don't like what you got a willing buyer and a willing seller, okay? And if you don't like it, don't sign it. I wish more students would bring their leases in for me to look at, but they're in such a hurry to sign them,
Yeah. And then I just have two
Yeah,
more
no,
questions,
whatever.
but I don't know, over the last year or so, about how many students have come in with concerns to
About the inspection?
or just landlord-tenant complaints generally?
Oh, I probably see in an average year, 100 students on landlord-tenant stuff, okay? And that ebbs and flows. In all candor, I think more students probably look on the internet now, and they're too lazy to come and see me, and they don't want to spend $5, so they get, like people get their health, determine what they need to do. Well, I guess I'm having a heart attack, but yeah, it's on the net, so who cares? That sort of thing, okay?
You got to save for that cup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
And then, is there, I don't know, any sort of, do you find that this issue affects like all types of students equally? There's
Yeah.
not really any, okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's, that it's, if mommy and daddy own, some big corporation, are they less likely, is that student less likely to come in? No, I think it crosses all economic strata. I think it crosses all, race, gender, whatever, okay? We got a pretty welcoming office, and we've never had issues with any of those kind of things, so I would, yeah, it covers it.
All right, thank you.
What about for disability? Have you had any?
I haven't, and that's a good question. I really haven't had any disability-related issues, whether there's accommodations for them and so on. The thing that I've seen more of is support animals, okay? And, the legislature within the last, 6 to 8 months, whatever, has changed that rule. You got to have, if you need a support animal, got to have a psychologist from the state say you need the support animal. And that thing was abused, and it was abused by students, okay? And I'm the owner of 2 golden retrievers, and I tell people I bought them as hunting dogs, and where I am in life, they'll probably be support animals, okay, before they go to their grave, okay? But I'm not real patient with students on that. If I think they're perpetrating a fraud, I let them know, landlords have a right to scope that out and make certain that there's an animal in there that is for appropriate purposes, because you don't have to have a cat in an apartment very long that's not taken care of and not using a litter box, and you have real issues. They urine into the wood and stuff. It's not insignificant. So, yeah, but it's mainly been about support animals. And, I see a lot of students come in with why they can't fly on the plane with their little foo-foo dog. And don't get me started. you know,
How long have you been in the position?
41 years.
So you're just getting started, huh?
I'm just getting started. Yeah, well, you know, I'm practicing law. I haven't got it down yet, but I'm working on it. Yeah, yeah.
You made a comment about that the house, I forget exactly how you said it, but something to the effect that the housing stock was in better condition now or something like that?
Yes, I think,
Yeah, why do you think that?
well, I think overall, you don't see as many people, or I don't see as many students who are living in a lot of these older houses. I realize they're there, and, you know, and I mean, I drive through the campus and so on, but I think, you know, when you took that whole block where Radford is and put, you know, Schwab put up nice places and so on, and they're not cheap, but, you know, that I mean, that's pretty nice stuff, okay? And it can be pricey, and but that's the market, okay? They're getting what the market will bear. So I think it has improved. It's far from perfect, and you know, there's still a lot of issues. The only war story I'll tell is, oh God, it's 20 years ago now. I had a student come in, complained about the fact there wasn't a deadbolt lock on the premises. So I wrote a letter to the landlord, and, you know, we can actually keep copies of that. And I said, and I sent one, I think, to the housing inspector. I said, you need to put a deadbolt on. It's dangerous. 3 young girls living there. Well, before the deadbolt got put on, one of the girls was violently assaulted, raped. Okay. And her parents came to me and said, you know something about landlord-tenant law, you know, this landlord, they didn't fix it, and it certainly, she wouldn't have, you know, they'd had a door. The guy rattled the door open. He just rattled, and the lock was loose, and in he goes. And I said, well, I can get you to somebody who does personal, you know, injury work and that sort of thing. And they said, no, we want you to do it. And, you know, I had them sign off and everything. And it cost this landlord, and we settled out of court, because I sat in when this young lady had to testify in criminal court. And I told her parents, I said, I'm not putting her through that in a civil action. Okay, there isn't enough money. Okay. And, you know, they told me what they thought would be fair, and we got that number plus a little bit, and, you know, that was fine. But I look back and, you know, I mean, the failure to repair can have tragic consequences. Okay, and that was a classic. Now, that doesn't happen every day, thank God. But, you know, so when people say, oh, yeah, well, you know, they're overreacting, well, you know, I would hope that when, you know, a parent comes to these apartments or comes to see me, I can say, yeah, we think the city is doing everything they can to ensure that your student, you know, your son or daughter are going to be safe here. And I realize, you know, you can't go and inspect every property. It's imprecise, and accidents happen and tragedies happen, but they happen more so if, you know, everybody turns a blind eye to it. And I'm not saying you are, you know, quite the contrary.
Question I have, the city's approved the Annex 71 apartments, and now recently there'll be some more possibly going in on Jackson and Marion. Have you had any issues with tenants at the Annex?
The Annex is the one that they didn't have places completed. Okay, so they shuffled them into other apartments. Okay, and we dealt with a lot of issues about, you know, there should be some compensation here because they weren't necessarily comparing apples with apples and that type of thing. And that's when I talked to the attorney down in Indianapolis, and we got it resolved. At least I assume we did, because the students, I told them what to do, and, you know, made some calls, and they didn't come back. Which the whole thing with their lease agreement, okay, is a pro forma lease that's generated someplace in, whether it's Indianapolis or Florida, okay, and it is, you know, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's so long. Much of the stuff is boilerplate that doesn't apply here and so on. I don't know if I was renting an apartment, I would read the whole thing, okay?
Right.
But overall, no, I can't. I got to be fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're an out-of-state company, and I
Right.
think the ones coming in are from Iowa too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a concern that
No, it's-
hopefully they're, you know, we don't have any issues without it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Anything else?
Yeah, I had a couple of
Sure.
questions. I was both a student who rented apartments and a landlord later on.
Okay.
And I rented from a very good landlord, and I rented from a very not good landlord. Ironically, the not good landlord is the one who's still in business. And obviously, that was a few years ago, too, so they've been around a long time. I was very concerned when I saw the 40 questions or whatever that had been shared from one of the rather, I mean, I looked them up, they have 106 properties at least. The number 40 on there, do you have any ideas?
Which
She's referring.
With Star Property?
Yeah.
Star, yeah. okay,
It's a
that's
Star property,
construction.
non-standard
Or not, yeah, okay.
rental provision.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, they're telling them, do not let inspectors in. The whole point of the inspection is for safety and health for the students. Do you have any ideas on how to educate the students to not initial that part, or,
Well, even if the initial is not enforceable, okay.
but in their heads? I mean, let's face it, 19, 20-year-olds that are renting.
You're absolutely
It doesn't
correct.
matter quite frankly, how
Right.
smart they are, they're still inexperienced.
Right. We can, I mean, we've tried to educate students, and I put on seminars, and now if I get 5 people to come to a housing seminar, it's a good day for me. Okay.
Really?
I've long ago put my ego aside, because I thought I was gonna, be planning to do a full house, and it isn't happening, okay? But there are some ways we can do it. I'd be more than happy to, put out a campus-wide email and so on, and the administration would be receptive for that, and I'll mention that, if you are seeing leases that say, ignore the inspector, don't allow the inspector in, okay? Ignore them, do not initial them. Even if you would initial them, they're not enforceable, but, strongly don't initial them, and that may come.
Well, and explain why the inspection can benefit them.
Oh, yeah, that we've put out several times, yeah. But I'm more than willing to do it again. It's
7 more times and maybe they'll hear you, right?
yeah. And we can do some things. I was talking to my, the gentleman who's the administrative assistant in the office, and, even we put some flyers out, there's some things we could do, hanging them in the dorms, and, because they're gonna be going on next year and renting a place, and just, even if it's more on a page, they're not gonna ignore it, but if you can put 10 bullet points, okay, and then just say, contact legal services if you have any questions. I'd be happy to do that. Yeah. And if we get something put together, I'll get it to somebody here, or Casey, or Andrew, or whatever, so they can, know what's out there.
That'd be
Yeah,
good.
the blowing it back against the inspection thing is just unconscionable in my way of thinking.
We had been trying to work with the Oshkosh Student Association, but our contact there was basically told there's going to be some app that the university was coming out with, so just to hold, which meant that nothing happened.
Right. And was this last year? Yeah.
This was probably some landlord who gave a lot of money to the university, I'm guessing.
Well,
From
there's
what you
that problem.
said.
And then when you have transition in student administrations, okay, the left arm doesn't know what the right arm was doing, okay? And we have really good leaders this year. Last year, and that ebbs and flows too. Some years they're crackerjacks and others not so good, okay? I'll talk to them about the app too, to see if there's, is,
Well, that was just another avenue that we thought we
Right.
had to reach the students.
right. No, I think it makes sense. My feeling is there's never too much information. And, some of this can be life-saving.
We have another letter here from you written on behalf of a, tenant client to another landlord in town that we know anecdotally at least is pretty problematic.
Right.
Did you receive any kind of response?
I think I know the letter, and no.
Okay.
And oftentimes, I'll follow up, and my follow-up is usually, I previously wrote you on such and such a day, a copy of that letter and closer information, what are you doing? And the other thing is students can lose interest, okay, which they shouldn't, okay? And I tell them, that's part of being responsible. I can't take them by the hand and, take them around. Sometimes I'd like to, and you have freshmen come in, and you look at some freshmen and you say, who is dressing you? How are you getting? How are you taking nourishment? Okay, because they're so immature. Others, I'm going, why don't you get on this side of the desk, because you're obviously smarter than I am, and tell me what I need to do, okay? I mean, so it's just incredible, the difference you see. And I hate to say this being the male of the species, but more often than not, the males, freshmen, are just clueless. And the females, I'm looking, oh man, you got to date an upperclassman, because it's going to be like dating a third grader for a while. Okay? So,
Hey, facts are facts.
yeah, it's reality. So, anything else?
I think that's it.
Any other questions? Or Mr. Forsgren, thank you so much.
Yeah,
This
I
has
hope
been-
this was some help.
Oh, this is wonderful. This
Very
is
much so,
informative,
yes.
enlightening, and I think we look forward to, hopefully maybe working with you to get some
Oh, yeah,
more information
and
out to
you know where to
the
reach me,
campus
and
community. Yeah.
You know, and my days at the office are Thursdays and Tuesdays, but I can get down here, or get, you know, I mean, if there was a meeting or something, you would want some input and want me physically present. I think I've run out of excuses for not showing up. Okay, I got both shoulders worked on, and I think I had the flu or one the other day, so I should be good to go for a while. Okay?
And yeah, like, well, on a personal note, I appreciate that you were willing to, you know, kind of speak against the inherent flaws in that renter have rights to campaign, the yellow signs that you mentioned. And I too have been, you know, I experienced blowback trying to certain landlords or their agents attempted to like get me fired from the university too. So I've been there.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I'm not anti-landlord. They have every right, you know, and I have people I know are in the landlord business, and, you know, they run a good business like anything else, but, and it's, you know, that,
They're very necessary for our students. We
absolutely.
really need them,
absolutely.
but we do need the safety and health part of it too.
And I think at times, the community generally tends to forget overall, okay, what a wonderful resource it is having the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. And I didn't go there, so I'm not cheerleading for the foundation. And by the way, will you all make a donation as I leave? You know, that's not where I'm going. But I think at times people lose track of that. It's a good resource. And overall, they're really nice young people to deal with. I tell my friends, you know, we're all sitting around at the table and I'm talking about, I got my shoulder's bad, and I just went to therapy. Oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I'm going, God, that's why I go to the university on Thursdays, because they're talking about life facing them and their adventures, and they're idealistic, okay, and naive and everything else. And I got to listen to you guys whine about your injuries. I said, this gets old, okay? So that's one reason that, you know, continue their ideas.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You know, any follow-up, like I said, everybody in the housing office knows where to get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to do whatever, okay?
All right, great.
I'll follow up on your concerns.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. That was invigorating. So let's move to item F on the agenda, new tenant law. Even after reviewing the minutes, I'm not 100% clear on which law we're discussing. Is that your issue, Danny?
That could have been it, yeah, the proposed municipal changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got a little bit of talk on that during Attorney Forsgren's presentation, so I'm a fan of giving it a shot, kind of like you said, if nothing else.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing it even, I mean, better to do it and fail than to not do it at all, so.
Right. I suppose then we should try and get some kind of draft language together,
I can work on that.
perhaps to review and for the next meeting. I'm not 100% certain on the process, so.
Would have to go through the city attorney's office. I don't know if Lynn would take it or if it were one of her assistants, but it would have to be an ordinance change, so then it would have to come from her office, recommendation from this board then, and then it would go in front of council for discussion, and so she would have to be the one that basically approves any changes in the ordinance.
But we can give her something to look at.
Yes,
to make
correct.
her job
Correct.
easier.
We can, this committee
faster.
could draft something if they feel that they'd like to see some changes in the current ordinance.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion on that? Is it something we should intend to move ahead on, at least have something to read and debate potentially for future meetings?
I appreciate you working on that, Danny.
Yep.
Yeah, no problem.
Seeing no other discussion on that, we'll move to item G, the Tenant Bill of Rights. And this is something I've been working on. I apologize for not having a draft together, but essentially the idea I have is modeling off of what Kansas City, I'm not sure Kansas or Missouri, I'll ask the president, but if they recently passed a Tenant Bill of Rights, which lists 10 important rights and opportunities that tenants have in order to, maximize their enjoyment of living in the property. And I had a discussion with Mr. Roloff recently, and we chatted about it and decided, or came to the conclusion that as just some sort of resolution from council, that this would work best, because even the 10 items don't change code. Like, there's no actual change in ordinance. It's just sort of a statement from the city, symbolic if nothing else, enshrining the idea that tenants have rights, and of course that the city is here to help protect and uphold them. So I will get draft language together for the next meeting. And it's pretty straightforward stuff, just sort of reiterations of things that are already in code, kind of laid out perhaps a little bit more clearly. Any questions for me on that?
No, thank you for doing that.
All right. We'll move on to item F, code compliance via training. I've also been working on this. Again, I apologize for not having a completed draft, but I'm putting together a PowerPoint presentation currently wherein I'm breaking down the inspection checklist into like exterior and interior. The request of the apartment association has been to focus on the top 10 most common violations, but I figure I'll just prep all of them kind of listed on the inspection sheet. So my idea is to include slide, in the presentation, information on which state laws and local statutes, these issues fall under. Perhaps then some examples through photos of different violations of that item. So probably need some help from inspection services on that. And then some hints or tips for making repairs and corrections.
So this is your target market for this is the landlords.
Correct, especially ones that are delinquent or not delinquent, but face a lot of inspection violations, and it's always just generally beneficial. I think this is something that could be presented at apartment association meetings, for instance, just for the benefit of everyone. So that's the training part. I haven't done much on the compliance element of it so much. If there needs to be perhaps a change in code to force compliance, or if it's just kind of an option that we provide to show, or that I'm willing to provide, or who's ever providing it to just show here's some resources, do your jobs, make your repairs.
Would we be making any kind of change to codes? That's all been done, right?
I mean, I guess if you think that there's new items that we need to put in the code that aren't there now, if there's some things you think that aren't on our list.
So we could make a suggestion for changing that locally.
Yeah.
It's just that it can't exceed
Yeah,
state
I
law,
can't.
right?
Right. So
Yeah, there's
I'm
certain
not
things you can't.
right. I'm not really looking for ordinance changes as part of this. Just just the most common violations and ways to remedy, as well as I'll include a spiel on the inspection program itself, and kind of probably some language on fines and things, and what will happen if compliance is not done.
And the benefits of having your.
And the benefits of compliance for landlords and tenants, including some of the scholarly research I've done on things that suggest that, things like making repairs on time and having agents or property managers accessible to make repairs are the best indicators of long-term rental property income. Any other questions on that?
Can't wait to see it.
All right, move on to item G, social media updates.
So we've got, we went with January was the fire safety. February was suggested that we would do renter's insurance. And I guess we're looking for help from anyone from the board to possibly get us some article or something to post on that. And then for March and April, we'd be looking for suggestions for that. And I guess if we don't have anything today, we can always get that emailed in to us.
Did we talk about doing energy efficiency or something, a green topic for March, right? That was the.
That's a good idea. That would be a good one.
Yeah, energy efficiency. It's still cold out, but
There's
things are
also
warming up.
a program that I can get you some information on where landlords can actually benefit from improving their properties energy-wise. We had a presentation on it at the Sustainability Board.
Yeah, if you could forward that on to us, that'd be something that we can stick in there for our March
Yeah,
post.
yeah.
All right. Any other comments or questions on social media? Move then to item H, inspection updates.
Okay, so for the last 2 months, we had sent out 200 letters requesting inspections. Out of those letters, we received 1 inspection. That was in Area D. Area D is south of Wetzel, Main Street, west, kind of that chunk in there. I'm not exactly sure where that address was that took place. We did actually have 2 other inspections that were called in, not from a letter, but over in the college area. We had 2 inspections that were done there by tenants that had just recently moved in. Out of those inspections, they averaged 7 violations per inspection.
So a slight uptick
Yeah.
from what we've been seeing.
So we had 3 inspections total, and only
Yeah.
1 from mailing out 200 letters.
Right, and so we, typically, we would have probably considered the 2 from the college area, like complaint-based, but they weren't really complaining. They said, hey, we're just moving in, can you come and inspect our apartment, which we had advised them to
Awesome.
do. So that, somehow they got that word, and that's good.
That's what we
So
were
we
doing
had
with
that,
the
so we
students.
counted that as a program inspection rather than a complaint-based, which would automatically charge the landlord. So we went with that on the program inspection.
Does the inspector leave his card and stuff, like a stack of them, to share with other students in a case like that?
I don't believe so,
Would that be a good idea?
probably. Okay. What
That
about
was-
that?
That was 3 inspections in 2 months or 1 month?
2 months.
2 months? And is that normal, or how many are you doing? How many?
That's the lowest we've had.
That's the lowest we've had.
Yeah. And is that, now you said that these 2 were program inspections versus complaint. Do you also have additional complaint inspections?
Right.
Yeah. How many of those do you get?
Probably at least 2 or 3 a week.
Yeah, okay. I was sort of surprised that there was that few. So you get 3 complaints a week approximately.
Similar number of violations per unit in those instances, or?
Usually those are higher.
Was there, how many violations were with the 1 inspection from the letters? Was that around 7 also? I know
Yeah,
they've
they
been
average,
averaging
with those
6.
3 inspections, they average set. He has actually got them down here. 1 had 4, 1 had 11, and 1 had 7. I'm not
Okay.
sure which one, but
Okay.
4, 11, and 7.
Maybe the 11 knew to phone in a request.
Any other questions on inspections? Seeing none, we'll move on to item I, residency requirements for landlords. This is another thing I've been looking into. So I found in my research that several communities across the U.S., some of varying population sizes with varying, concerns for safe and fair housing and things like that, do actually have residency requirements worked into their ordinances. And a lot of that language kind of mirrors some of what what the city already has in terms of the registration part of the rental inspection ordinance, which we know calls for registering the property owner or a managing agent, right? Yep. So there's several examples of municipalities that have similar language, but then also have the additional that landlord or an identified manager or property agent need to reside within a certain distance need to reside within a certain distance from the city, usually about a 5 to 10 mile radius. What states have found, or what various places have found, Washington State has a policy like this in state law and found that it helped deal with a lot of common problems, including mold. So just having, and as I mentioned earlier, having reliable maintenance is a good long-term indicator of rental income. So having having agents nearby both deals with problems and makes it more desirable for tenants to stay in those properties. Additionally, the state of Minnesota recognized that it solved problems with what they call snowbirding, so the out of state property owners renting properties but living out of state. Some of the issues that Attorney Forsgren brought up might apply to that as well. And a variety of communities, Hazleton, Pennsylvania, Middleton, New York, all have written into their codes, again, language similar to what we already have with the registration part of it, but then just the additional requirement that the person registered needs residence in the city in the city or within that defined radius of city limits, and that proof of residency is required when that registration is made. So, and I don't think that addition would conflict with state code currently. I don't really see it as being something that goes beyond the code or goes beyond state law. So my idea would be to amend the registration part of the ordinance to include a residency
That would be
requirement.
tough. We've already approved properties that belong to people out of state.
Right,
Annex 71 is one.
sure, but it doesn't have to be the owner.
No, just the
property.
contact person.
Yeah.
Right, we have that already, so.
They would have to hire an agent if they weren't in the area.
Correct, they're
themselves.
required to do that now.
They are.
They are.
Within how close?
I don't think I don't think we have a
I'm not
requirement
sure, I'm
of-
not sure the requirement is for how far they are.
There has to be a
there is one.
registered agent.
Yeah, there should be.
All it says right now is there
But if
has
the
to be.
registered agent is in Indianapolis, that doesn't really solve the problem.
It still gives us the opportunity to have someone to contact, and that was the idea behind the ordinance. Council struggled with that already, just that requirement, so I don't think they would go for pursuing having the person, actually, the owner of the property live in the city.
Again, not the owner, but
But an agent
But
an agent.
within,
And if there's already out-of-state operators, like,
they'd be exempt already, yeah. If you change the ordinance, you'd have to grandfather those that are already here.
I see.
Like those apartments out, for a good example, the apartments out on the west side of Oshkosh, the contact person lives in Appleton. For all those apartments, there's like a 250, those off of Witzel and Oakwood area.
Yeah.
So, you know,
You could look at it and see how close people were, and if they were all that close, you just make your residency requirement 25-mile radius or something.
I'm not sure what we're solving though, and I would disagree with doing this. I know Milwaukee has this written in. I don't know if they still do, but I used to work for a large nonprofit that managed a lot of apartments all around the state, and they were headquartered up near Rice Lake in a small town called Elmina. And just the registration process of proving, who it was that, because you have the owner that's up there, and then you have to designate a local person. Well, that local person, all of these apartment buildings will have an on-site caretaker or something like that. But those caretakers turn over all the time. And so then you have to re-register that person, and then you have to prove that they live there. And it's just, for what it was, I don't know that it solved any problems, but it created a whole nightmare of bureaucracy for the nonprofit and for the city. They have to monitor all that back and forth. It got to the point where you had to show, there was one thing where we had an LLC that was the registered agent, and then you had to show on the state website that the LLC's mailing address was the same as the, it's just,
Yeah.
it was just so much of a nightmare for something that I don't really think was solving any extra problems.
Well, there's problems with repairs often in Oshkosh, and we know that
But we have
student
problems
groups
with repairs of people that live right here, and that's not gonna solve that problem.
live right
We could
where?
ask John.
Who live
I mean,
right
John
here
could
in
tell us.
Oshkosh.
John could tell us if there's problems, right?
Yeah, but to Todd's point, we've got problems with local landlords as well as out-of-state landlords. I don't think it really matters. Just someone that lives right in the city of Oshkosh is no different than someone that lives in Indianapolis.
Well, I was workshopping this with a couple of people. I'd obviously like to see some more of the research first, but I mean, their biggest point was that if you have these landlords, especially out of state ones that have to jump through all these extra hoops, it's going to hinder development for people that want to come in and maybe build
Right.
somewhere. And they're going to say they're going to see oh, there's a residency requirement, and they're going to either not be able to do that, or they're just going to build somewhere else. So
The key thing for having the registry program was actually the police department. They wanted to be able, if there was issues in a property, they would have somebody they can contact. Because there used to be, we didn't know who owned a lot of the properties in the city of Oshkosh. And so it was really, when the ordinance was drafted, and it came from John and Alan and those guys, was to at least have a registry. So there was at least a contact name, and it couldn't just be a P.O. box type situation. It had to be an actual address with a valid phone number, so that if there was an incident at some property, the police department or the city could contact them and let them know of this situation. Let's just, like you mentioned, a house party in the basement type situation. They had one of them, and they arrested a whole bunch of juveniles to let the landlord know, just so you know, your tenant is having underage drinking parties in your facility. If there's a fire, you as an owner of the property could be held accountable too. So it's just that kind of situation. Like you're saying, how far do you take that out? Yeah, but at least we have something on record, and we're trying to get them all registered so that at least we have contact for all the rental properties within the city. Whether they live here or not, we have a valid name, address, and contact person.
and that I think is super important.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're doing now, right, John?
Right.
Correct? Okay.
Okay.
Because we can't even require staff to live in the city of Oshkosh. So how do you require a rental owner to live in the city?
By putting it in the code. But, all right, if I guess the prevailing feeling is that there's not an issue to be solved and that the status quo is doing an adequate job, I'm willing to concede that point until additional evidence is found. Glad I did that. Item J, follow-up for the January 28th workshop. So I was there, Danny was there,
I was there.
Margie, Linda, and Todd. For the viewers at home, this workshop discussed impediments to fair housing in the city of Oshkosh, as well as proposals for the community block grant program to alleviate some of those concerns. I thought, even if the presentation itself was not particularly informative, there was a lot of good information in the literature, and I see a lot of areas of concern for this board, as well as opportunities perhaps to, liaise and work with other boards and commissions in the city, like the Council on Aging, for instance, because issues pertaining to the elderly and the disabled were, uniquely noted as impediments to fair housing in that report. So I'm excited about some of those opportunities. That was one of my takeaways from it.
Well, and as a reminder, anybody who has any input on that should be getting that in by the 24th of February. Is that what the reminder said? Soon, I know.
I thought it was the 28th, but in hers,
I think it was the
email is the
28th.
21st.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Whatever the email said, I think we better go with.
Well, I sent her, I thought it was the 20th. I hadn't heard back from her.
What was everyone's favorite part of the report?
I was wondering how much they paid for it. Do you know, Steve, how much that cost?
No.
I was just curious as I was there.
I don't.
because,
I was
you know,
supposed to be there, but I had a medical emergency, so I couldn't make it. But, yeah, I was the one that thought the rental advisory board should be included. And I think it's because of the fair housing situation, some of the things that, we're trying to get out to the landlords, get out to the tenants for home repairs, those types of things, and that there are block grant dollars available. And we all know, or at least city staff knows, that a lot of people don't take advantage of those programs. And we need to get that out there. And so I thought it was important that this board was made aware of some of those opportunities in that. So I'm glad to hear that there was some good take back from that. So
And thank you for including us in that, Steve. It makes us feel more like we're a part of the city when we actually,
Get invited to things, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
get
it
included,
helps.
You know,
Well, every board has a little piece of the pie to what their importance is, and sometimes it gets lost in that, and so you just have to think about those things, and if we're bringing the RDA in and we're bringing all these other boards and commissions, why isn't the Rental Housing Advisory Board being part of that? Because, again, a lot of those programs help landlords, that will eventually help our tenants, so I'm
thanks.
glad you could all make it.
One of the things that I found interesting is that in the report, they said that there were no, like, consolidated areas in Oshkosh, but they felt that there wasn't, consolidated areas in Oshkosh were, that were in places that, how do I want to put this? Deprived areas and like large areas in the city. And yet, from our perspective, one of the areas that we see that is problematic is an area on the other side of Murdoch Street and on the north side of Murdoch Street there. I don't have a map in front of me. West of Bowen or east of Bowen.
Oh, those apartments off.
Yeah, where they're not HUD or low income, but they're low income. They're not considered low income, but the rents are cheap.
Right.
And so the area is, really not all that great, and the landlord there doesn't keep it up. So, but an area like that doesn't make it into one of these reports. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, that I found that interesting that that sort of area didn't fit into this report.
Right.
When it's a problematic area for us.
Was that something you shared with them?
No, it's an idea I'm going to, though.
Good.
Yeah, and these are just drafts of the report and the development or the consolidated plan. So there will be some additions after public feedback. So we'll encourage all the board members and our audience at home to read and submit public comment by February 28th, and there will be presumably another draft or a final version out after that.
They also said that a renters association might be a good idea.
Yep, that was one thing that was of a special interest to me too. Is they recognize the importance of a tenants union or renters association to help deal with some of these issues. So hopefully we'll continue. That will be something that happens in the near future. Comments, questions, follow up on the report.
I'm just looking at her email. It does say February 21st.
21st, I'm sorry. Public comment by February 21st. All right. Any other discussion there? Move then to item K on the agenda, future agenda items for our April 8th, 2020 meeting. I will get drafts out of the proposed Bill of Rights as well as some of the code compliance training.
And possibly we'll see something on the new tenant law.
Yeah, we
draft.
can work on that.
Maybe we should put our action plan and strategic plan on it again. I want to find out who's got the brochures so I can check several places to see if they're needing some, or just go around with them. I want to come back and report.
I think all the brochures are in with the farmers market stuff, which should be in.
Yep, I
Yeah.
have those.
And where are you located? Where are you?
Room 201, second floor.
Okay, I'm going to come and get a bunch.
Okay.
And take them around to different places, and I'll just kind of report on that.
Yep.
Next meeting.
Sounds good, thank you. Any other business to discuss next time? I'll reach out to the student groups again and see if maybe we can get some more feedback from them on how things have been developing. And I'm sure we might have an update on the consolidated plan and the, or on the consolidated plan, so we can follow up then too.
And are we having a state of the city?
Oh, yes.
State of the City is March 9th, Monday, March 9th.
Are we staffing a booth?
Yeah, this is not an agenda item, but it's something we need to figure out. Yeah, so Monday, March 9th is State of the City. In the past, this board has set up a little booth there for people to come and look around and talk to prior to the speech. I've done it with Linda in years past. We don't get a lot of people talking to us necessarily, but it's still interesting it's still good for visibility, and I know neighborhood associations and things are kind of glad to see us there. They come up and talk to us. So is there any interest in running a booth?
Well, I think State of the City is a marvelous event, and everybody who lives in the city should attend, just because you can learn so much about our government from all the different places, all the different departments. I assume we still have all the materials from previous years that we can just, did you inherit those?
I believe so. Yep.
We have them.
So the
Okay.
pictures, the brochures,
Yeah,
the
so
usual
it's
stuff.
just a matter of if we can set it up, whether we have someone to staff it or not, but maybe somebody here is interested in staffing it that night. I have 2 other places to be already that night, so.
Well, I'll make it 3 years running, then I'll be there.
What time is it at? You know?
It starts at 6, and city manager's presentation, I believe, is at 7.
Yeah, so they do like open house at 6, and then there's some like community awards that get given out, and
It's at the
then
convention center.
yeah. I can manage if no one else is down. But
Even if a lot of people can't, I'll be there, but a lot of people can't attend the booth, at least have the information out, and
Yep.
the information would be available, because I know planning services has a big booth.
Yeah, we've got
Yes.
a booth there, so I'll be.
so I'll plan on attending, and I'll report back in the April meeting then.
Thanks, Jim.
Certainly. Any other items of discussion? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Declare this board meeting closed.